MLabs is working on so many different projects in the Cardano ecosystem. It's kind of crazy. The explosive growth they've had since the Alonzo hard fork and smart contracts have been implemented on the Cardano blockchain has seen this company in particular grown so much. They seem to be hiring up every last single Haskell dev out there and delivering some really cool projects in the ecosystem. So I'm really excited to have Ben Hart from MLabs. He's the head of Cardano Operations, and we go through a whole bunch of things at MLabs, as well as a couple of really cool catalyst proposals that they're working on to make the ecosystem just that much better. All right, let's get into this interview.
Yeah, gotta do it like that. You've been listening to the Learn Cardano podcast.
Ben, welcome to the podcast.
Hi there.
So let's get into a little bit about your background and how you became the head of Cardano Operations at MLabs. So how'd you get into the crypto space, and then how'd you get this position at MLabs?
I've worked at consultancies for a good chunk of the last decade now, and I had worked a little bit on Ethereum prior to this. So as MLabs jumped onto its first Cardano project, I was sort of the natural choice to lead the project, coming with a bit of experience and a bit of knowledge about Cardano as well. And as we grew, I essentially maintained that. So I've sort of first and foremost been keeping an eye on the ecosystem for MLabs and helping ingest a lot of the news and events into our various projects across the entire crypto space now. So we're on DeFi, we're on a couple of DEXs, we're in the NFT space quite a bit as well, and then the GameFi space, and we're building bridges. So We're all over the place. And so a lot of my role has been about sort of keeping everyone organized and helping these new project managers find their feet there as well.
So what does MLabs do? What do they encompass? Is it just all Cardano related stuff, or do they work on a fintech as well? Like what's the actual core business of MLabs? So
MLabs, up until about a year ago, had focused entirely in the enterprise traditional finance space. Now we moved into Cardano, and now Cardano is about 80 or 85% of our business. We also have some work over on Solana and a little bit on Polkadot as well.
Wow, that's 80%. That's absolutely huge. I guess you just grew with the Cardano ecosystem as it grew with the smart contracts and whatnot.
That's right. Yeah, we grew almost tenfold over the last year.
My God, I did hear that you guys were like snapping up every last Haskell developer on the planet Earth, essentially, as you were trying to grow.
I don't know about that, but we do hire worldwide. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So how big is MLabs now? Like how many clients? How many staff? Like what's the whole ecosystem there look like?
So we're at about 125 staff total.
That's big.
About 100 of that is Haskellers. And we've got, I think, over 20 clients now.
And a lot of them are Cardano related projects. And can you talk about any that MLabs are working on?
Yeah, we're actively working on Liquid, the whole Liquid suite of apps. So there's now 2 or 3 products coming out of Liquid. We worked with SundaySwap. We didn't design SundaySwap, but we did supply development team members. We've also worked with MinSwap, and we're working with a number of other DEXs right now, including CardAX. We're working with our Ardana as well, mainly on their stablecoin. Let's see, there's Player Mint over on the NFT space. I'm Jira Wallet. There's so many clients now that once I start naming them, I have to be careful because now I'm going to leave someone off. So we work with a lot of different clients. I'm going to keep it with like the OG clientele from the middle of last year. So I'm going to cut it off there. But there's a lot of projects.
I might dig in and put a list of the various Cardano related projects that MLabs is working on, so that anyone that wasn't mentioned doesn't feel like they've been left out.
The best way is to go to mlabs.city. Just go to our website. Yeah. We've got all their logos there and check out those projects. Yeah.
Now, I was talking to Paul Fulbrook from CardAX, and he was talking about how their DEX was being written in a new language that was iteration of Plutus, and it was called Plutarch. And it really caught my attention because I hadn't really heard about it before. But what he was telling me about it, its optimization, its smaller footprint and everything sounded like an absolute gemstone to actually be working with. Can you talk a little bit about that and how it was implemented, how it's better, and what it is exactly?
Sure. Plutarch saw its birth in December of last year, 2021, at the Ardana project, actually. So on Ardana, we collaborate with another consultancy, Platonic Systems, and we saw a problem. We saw that for anything more complex than a DEX, really, there was no chance of ever getting your contract small enough and optimized enough that it would really work on the Cardano blockchain at the time, given the current restrictions. Now, restrictions have widened just a little bit, but there's still some concerns. Like you get 20 kilobytes or so of script space today. You get a fixed number of execution units for memory and CPU as well. And they were quite restrictive. So SundaySwap was able to launch under those restrictions, I think, as things widened up. But many other projects would just never get off the ground. There was just no way to express things efficiently enough in Plutus. So we looked at the Plutus compiler plugin that uses the Haskell compiler to do most of its work. And we saw that it was doing a lot of work to try to replicate Haskell's lazy semantics in what's called Plutus core. It's sort of the underlying bit of code that actually gets executed on chain. So we wanted to write Plutus core directly in a way that was more efficient. And that was essentially how Plutarch began. There's another language called Pluto, and we used a piece of that to build Plutarch. Plutarch now has had a lot of work done on it over the last 4 months, and it's continually getting new features. And there's things like FFI coming to it, so you can have just a piece of Plutarch included in a Plutus script or vice versa. There's a lot of flexibility there. Overall, Plutarch uses a quarter of the resources, a quarter of the space, a quarter of the memory, a quarter of the CPU as a comparable script implemented in Plutus. It's a really beneficial tool to use. It can be challenging to write.
Right. Okay. A quarter of the size and a quarter of the resources. That's pretty big. That's a sizable increase in performance. Really, you can get that many more transactions executed through the chain. It's quite a good improvement.
It's really good. The other thing, there's other tools out there, and I think it's worth mentioning. Well-Typed has a tool called Plutonomy that you can still write Plutus TX, and use all the same tools, but you can still run it. It's sort of a processor for your script, and you can get a 50% reduction that way. So,
wow. Okay.
Also a great tool that's out there in the ecosystem.
Right. So how do these upcoming Cardano improvement proposals affect Plutarch and how they're implemented? Because we're going to have things like reference scripts, so that you don't need to have the script directly in the transaction. How does that affect what you're doing with Plutarch? Is it still needed? Is it made redundant?
I think it's still valuable. I think the smaller you can make your scripts on chain, period, the better. And the reason for that is, especially if we're batching, even if we're not batching, you really want to get the overhead for running a transaction as low as possible, especially in a batching situation. And I think we're going to see a lot of projects that still use batching on the network for the next little while, like Sunday's Scooper model is an example of batching. So when this happens, like the script has to run, like there's some base overhead just to run the first transaction, but the script has to run many times, like for each transaction that needs to be processed in a batch. So when this happens, we should want to get that as small as possible so we can get as many transactions as possible to be rolled into this batch. right? As many orders as possible, I guess is the best way to put it. Yeah.
Really good to know. And are you seeing many more projects like taking this up? Is it or is it mainly a core thing that MLabs is using?
I mean, there's a number of projects across MLabs clientele, and I think there's some other ones out in the DeFi space. So I'm also involved with the Cardano DeFi Alliance, and I think I heard Ergodex was looking at it. There's a number of others out there that are adopting it. And there's actually, if you go on the Plutarch repo, it's Plutonomicon/Plutarch on GitHub. You will see there's actually a Discord where if you're not, part of the MLabs clientele, you can still go on the Discord, and that's where we do our primary support, whether you're a client or not, for Plutarch. And you'll also get support from some of the folks at Platonic who work on Plutarch as well.
That's really cool. Okay. Good to know. And I'll put those links for all those resources and whatnot in the show notes and the video description for anyone that's interested. But in some other development that you guys are doing, you're actually going through Project Catalyst as well with a couple of proposals, which I found quite interesting. I didn't realize that you guys actually went through this process. Now, why are you going through Project Catalyst to get funding from these things? I'm sure a company as large as MLabs would have like an R&D budget as well. Why go through Project Catalyst?
Yeah, we absolutely have an R&D budget, but what we saw when we got to Cardano was there's a dearth of tools in the system to achieve what we need to achieve. And if we want to move fast, we want to improve that R&D budget. And so we're going to Catalyst to get that kind of funding. So initially in round 7, we had done projects around DAO tooling, trying to get like a one-click DAO rollout system. And so that's under development right now.
Wow. Okay.
And now we also had a DeFi solution for sort of building up ETFs on chain. So those are under development currently. They're just kind of getting started. And with the ETF system, there's some legal work that we need to achieve first and foremost in the research. We need to find the right way to do it, where we're not selling unlicensed securities to people around the world. Like, we need to do it correctly from a regulatory standpoint. And then we have our projects in Fund 8. So we've got a few different projects there. We've got we want a language that you can use to describe how a smart contract should behave so that we can generate tests from that language and test it against the implementation of a smart contract. So it's really there to help with the audit process, but also just with the building of a smart contract, knowing what you need to achieve and knowing when you've actually achieved it, sort of automated security analysis. And the other thing that we want to do is we want to start to add features to this project, CTL, the Cardano Transaction Library that we've been working on. So this is a transaction builder for like a Web3-like experience on Cardano. So it'll abstract over a lot of the different wallets that are out there, and it'll help you build transactions. And I'd say off-chain building of transactions is a little bit more involved when it comes to Cardano than it was for Ethereum, but we want to give you those tools in the browser or in a it can also be used by a bot, but sort of in a JavaScript setting. And that way you're not sort of relying on some kind of centralized server to build up your transactions.
Gotcha. Okay, let's go back to that spec language for that you described earlier. What kind of value would people in the Cardano ecosystem get out of that? Is it for anyone that can use? Will it be open source? So
absolutely, both of these projects are already open source. So we've started these projects. These are really about funding rounds to provide specific sets of features that we don't currently have funding for. So when it comes to the spec language, this would be about test generation. We've got a test library, we've got a spec language. We need to make the spec language generate the tests, right? So that's the general area of the proposal, what we want to achieve, really. And how is this really going to benefit everyone? I'd say the more tools that we can get in this space, the more secure Cardano DeFi is going to be. So it's really, in the end, it's DeFi users not losing their funds is the ultimate benefit, right?
Yeah.
and not just DeFi users. Like you could have a formally verified NFT marketplace, but in general, you're going to see more secure dApps. You're going to see developers have the tooling to develop quicker. I think we're going to see shorter timelines because I'd say about 60% of the time spent on a Cardano smart contract, maybe more, is testing and bug fixing. So if you have someone who can, something that sort of writes a bunch of tests for you, you get a ton of speed out of that because now you're just trying to understand what the test is looking for and going and fixing the bug, right? As long as the tests are actionable, and that's going to be the really key thing.
Yeah, in my day-to-day life, I do a lot of automated testing. I use a testing script. Can't remember the name of it at the top of my head. I think it was called Jasmine. Yep, in the PHP space in Laravel, and we write up the test there, and try and automate the process as much as possible. So any change that we do, a month down the track, we have all those tests written, so we hopefully don't break anything. I'm assuming it's something similar to that, or is it something that's more very broad and set in stone beforehand?
Well, it's not set in stone, but what you have is I don't know if you've ever heard of I think it was called Cucumber.
No, I haven't heard of that one.
The idea was you could have an English or simple description of what a feature is supposed to achieve, and then the tests that guarantee it right next to that, right?
Yeah.
So you could go sort of user story by user story and say, here are the tests that we write to make sure that this thing works that we want to guarantee to our users, right? You would be able to do something similar, but with code. You'd be able to say, oh, we've realized that we need a certain security restriction. We need to check for a certain signature in a certain situation, right? So you can add that to the spec, and the test will actually fall out automatically.
Wow,
right?
Okay.
So test generation is really the goal here.
And I just making that comparison to Jasmine, I absolutely loved it because the tests were human readable. Like you could go through it and understand clearly. So a non-technical person, like a testing administrator, could go through it and just go, "Yep, okay, that test is right. I can write these myself without the extreme technical knowledge." Especially writing Haskell smart contracts. It's Plutus smart contracts. That would have been quite hard.
I don't know if it will improve readability overall, but the goal is that at least we will save time. I think that's the key right now.
That's
because
the key.
The language itself, the spec language is implemented in Idris, which is what you might think of as sort of a successor to Haskell in a lot of ways. In some ways, it's maybe a bit better. It uses what are called dependent types. Okay. And this allows you to, I suppose, infer a lot more about the meaning of a program, and when it sees certain behaviors, it can know about the best practices that go with that behaviors and sort of generate tests that enforce those best practices. So, for example, if you're minting an NFT and it's supposed to be unique, it can make sure that there isn't a way to sort of mint that infinitely.
All of these names for these programs and languages is so strange. Who comes up with all these names? Okay, and this other one here, the browser-based transaction builder for that smoother Web3 experience. Mm-hmm. How will this affect all the wallets in the ecosystem at the moment?
So I think right now everybody's working against CIP 30. At least that's my hope, because that's what this is all based on.
Yeah. Okay.
So Nami got out sort of ahead and got their dApp connector out, I think, before Yoroi by a month or two. So a lot of the first launches, they support Nami. They support Yoroi, maybe. And I think they're also starting to support CC Vault. We'd kind of like to create a library where, as quick as we can, we get all of the wallets that support CIP30 implemented in a way where it's seamless. So I think the real winners here are going to be front-end developers. What's going to happen is your smart contract developers, they're going to be able to write something like what they were taught to write for PAB in their off-chain code, the contract monad that builds the transaction before the script accepts it. They're going to be able to take that code, they're going to be able to adapt it. So right now that code might be written in Haskell. they can easily port that over to a language called PureScript, which is a Haskell-like language. And we hope to have an example out this week showing people what that transformation looks like. It's pretty straightforward. It's almost one-to-one, and we're adding features as we go and getting it stabilized. Now, right now, the library just works with Nami. We want to start to add wallets. We want to add Jiro, Yoroi, Typhon.js, which is like a library for using wallets, and it's really so that we can have a good testing story without loading up a browser. We also want to support CC Vault, which I think just got named Eternal.
Yep, that's right.
And a few others as well. So we really want to make all of the existing wallets that support CIP30 sort of first-class citizens. And then the front-end developer, this is great. They're going to get an SDK from their back-end developers. It's going to have a connect function. They're just going to drop that into their React or AngularJS element that they've got, where someone's going to click a button to connect and maybe select a wallet from a drop-down, right? And from that, the library will sort of take care of it. When there's an interaction with the blockchain, their smart contract developers can have built, say it's a staking contract, so like a stake and unstake functions, and they can just drop those in where they belong without worrying too much about how to build this transaction. So the more involved work can be written by the smart contract developers, and they can just easily provide a JavaScript SDK for web and hopefully soon for mobile once that story gets ironed out.
Wow. Okay. Because on a side project that we're doing, we're building a integration for WordPress so that or WordPress websites can connect to all of these wallets. And we are spending quite a lot of time because we're supporting 6 wallets at the moment, writing all these different transactions for these wallets. So yeah, it's really time consuming. So this is going to save us a huge amount of time. And well, from the front end side of things, I love it.
And it's usually logic that would be implemented on the back end anyway. It's just in the Web3 space, you end up putting that on the front end so that you're more decentralized, right? But it is like it's more involved and it has less to do with the UI typically. So that's sort of the strategy. And so we want to have templates out very soon that people can use to just sort of bootstrap the Cardano transaction library alongside their smart contracts and start putting out SDKs and connecting them right up. So this week I want to have a video demo, I'm hoping, one way or the other. And also we're going to show some example projects using it. Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay. So how much are you asking for both of these particular proposals for funding?
I think each of them is right around the 70,000 mark. I'd have to go take a look for the specifics. But in each case, it's essentially we want a developer for a few months to focus on the specific areas of generating tests in the case of the Spec language and really adding wallet support in the case of the CTL. Yeah. Okay.
I think the Cardano community in general would find a lot of value out of both of these, especially for myself in the Web3 experience and running those transactions. I think it's going to be highly valuable and can save a huge amount of time having this already set up and available for us all. So it's a couple of really cool proposals to actually support and vote in Fund 8.
I hope so.
Okay, Ben, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you and learning all about MLabs and all these proposals that you guys are building out as well. And I'll put all of the links to it in the video description and the show notes. So if anyone wants to find out more, they can read those proposals and hopefully, fingers crossed, vote for them as well.
Really hope so.
All right. Awesome, Ben.
All right.
It's been a pleasure.
Likewise. Thank you very much.
Now, I really hope that if you are able to vote in Project Catalyst, this Fund 8, that you do consider these 2 proposals. They're all those little things that will really help out developers, speed up development, and to make things just that much easier. The more tools that there are, the better apps that can be built, and the better experience they can create. So more faster development is the key of the game here. Now, couple this with a couple of things that the Milcometer team are building out, such as the infrastructure for wallets, for example. It's just making things a lot quicker and better. So I'm really excited about some of these proposals that these core key development teams are looking at, as well as so many of the other ones out there in the ecosystem. Voting is open, so I highly encourage you to get out there, read over the proposals, and start looking at what you can possibly vote for to try and help grow this Cardano ecosystem. I'm really looking forward to the future of it. Now, I do have another interview coming up with Ben about working in the Cardano ecosystem, how to get a job, what skills you need to actually have, what degree you might need to look at to be able to be building dApps in the Cardano ecosystem, and also some tips in regards to actually building out your first one too, like the strategy, what you should be doing. Now, if you really are interested in that kind of thing, if you really love the Cardano related content, please give me that thumbs up, click subscribe, click that notification bell. Works wonders for the YouTube algorithm. I'll see you in the next video.
Yeah, gotta do it like that. You've been listening to the Learn Cardano podcast. Gotta get it hype. Crypto is what we like, but this is not investment or financial advice. Gotta do your research, cause it's risky. We know it is. This show is educational and it's informative. Crypto's the future, really, it ain't no debate.